My name is Margaret Thompson, but everyone calls me Maggie. I'm 62 years old, and for most of my life, I believed that family meant forever. That belief held strong until one cold November evening, when my son Derek slapped me across the face 12 times while his wife Brianna stood in the doorway, filming it on her phone and laughing. They didn't know that the house they were humiliating me in was still legally mine, and they were about to find out that silence can be the loudest form of justice. It was Thanksgiving week in Seattle. The rain had been coming down steady for 3 days, that thick Pacific Northwest drizzle that gets into your bones. I'd spent the entire afternoon preparing Derek's favorite meal, the same turkey and cornbread stuffing I'd made every year since he was 5 years old. The kitchen smelled like sage and butter, and I remember thinking how much Tom would have loved to see our son coming home for dinner. My husband had been gone for 8 years, but his absence still felt fresh on holidays. Derek arrived late, as usual. I heard his BMW pull into the driveway around 7. 2 hours passed when he'd promised to be there. Through the window, I could see Brianna in the passenger seat, her face lit blue by her phone screen. Neither of them smiled. They sat in the car for a full 5 minutes before finally getting out. And I pretended not to notice. Pretended that my heart wasn't already sinking. Brianna came through the door first. She was wearing white, which always struck me as odd for someone visiting family. White pants, white sweater, white designer bag. Everything about her was carefully curated to show she didn't belong in a modest Seattle Craftsman with worn hardwood floors and family photos on the walls. She barely looked at me as she walked past. "Hi, Maggie," she said, not bothering with any warmth. She never called me Mom, never even considered it. To Brianna, I was just an obstacle, a relic from Derek's past that needed to be tolerated. Derek followed behind her, loosening his tie. He looked exhausted, but there was something else in his face too, a hardness I'd been seeing more and more over the past 2 years since he'd married Brianna. My son worked in real estate, luxury properties in downtown Seattle, and the money had changed him. Or maybe Brianna had changed him. Either way, the boy who used to bring me dandelions from the yard had disappeared somewhere along the way. "Mom," he said, barely glancing at me. "Something smells good." I tried to smile. "Your favorite. Turkey with cornbread stuffing. Just how you like it." He grunted and headed straight for the liquor cabinet. I'd stocked it with his preferred bourbon, the expensive kind that Tom used to save for special occasions. Derek poured himself 3 fingers without asking if I minded, then poured another for Brianna. We sat down to eat, and the silence was suffocating. I'd set the table with the good china, Tom's mother's set that had been passed down through 3 generations. Brianna looked at it with barely concealed contempt, as if eating from vintage plates was somehow beneath her. I tried to make conversation, asked about work, about their new condo downtown, about their plans for the holidays. Derek answered in short sentences, his jaw tight. Brianna just scrolled through her phone, occasionally showing Derek something that made him shake his head. Then I made the mistake. The small, innocent mistake that would change everything. "Derek, honey," I said gently. "I noticed the faucet in the upstairs bathroom is leaking again. Do you think you could take a look at it this weekend?" The silence that followed was different, sharper. Derek set down his fork slowly, and when he looked up at me, his eyes were cold. "The faucet in your house, you mean?" he said, emphasizing the word in a way that made my stomach drop. "I just meant—" "No, Mom. Let's be clear about something." He pushed his plate away. "This is my house now. You live here because I allow it. Because I'm generous enough to take care of you after Dad died and left you with nothing." That wasn't true. Tom had left me with plenty, including this house that we'd paid off together over 30 years. But I'd made the mistake of trusting Derek when he convinced me to put the house in his name for tax purposes after his father passed. Or at least, that's what he'd told me to do. What he didn't know was that I'd never actually completed the transfer. The preliminary papers were signed, but I'd never filed them with the county. Something had stopped me, some quiet voice in my head that said to wait. The house was still mine, legally and completely, but Derek had never bothered to check. "Derek, I didn't mean anything by it," I said softly, trying to de-escalate. "It's just a leaky faucet." "Just a leaky faucet?" He laughed. But there was no humor in it. "You know what your problem is, Mom. You don't know your place anymore. You think you can still tell me what to do, like I'm some kid who needs his mommy." Brianna had put down her phone now. She was watching with interest, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Derek, please." He stood up suddenly, his chair scraping hard against the floor. "I'm tired of this. I'm tired of you acting like you own this place, like you have any say in anything. Do you know how much it costs me to keep you here, to feed you, to pay the utilities, to put up with your constant nagging?" My heart was pounding. This wasn't my son. This was someone else, someone I didn't recognize. "I never asked you for anything," I said, my voice shaking. "I just wanted to have Thanksgiving dinner with my son." That's when he crossed the room. Later, I would replay this moment over and over, wondering if there was something I could have said or done differently. But in the moment, everything happened so fast. The first slap came out of nowhere. His palm connected with my right cheek so hard that my head snapped to the side, and I tasted blood where my teeth cut into my inner lip. I was so shocked that I didn't even cry out. I just stood there, frozen, staring at him. "Derek," I finally managed to whisper. The second slap came immediately after, harder than the first, then a third, fourth, fifth. He was methodical about it, almost calm, like he was checking items off a list. Each blow landed with precision, alternating between my left and right cheek. My ears were ringing, my vision blurred with tears. Behind him I could hear Brianna. She was laughing. Not a nervous laugh or a shocked laugh, but genuine amusement. She'd pulled out her phone and was recording, narrating like she was at some kind of entertainment event. "Oh my God, Derek," she said between giggles. "Finally! I'd been waiting for you to shut her up for months." 6, 7, 8. I stopped counting after that. I just stood there and took it, my face burning, my heart breaking into pieces. This was my son, the baby I'd carried for 9 months, the toddler I'd rocked to sleep every night, the teenager I'd defended when teachers called home about his behavior. This was my son, and he was beating me, while his wife laughed. When he finally stopped, I'd lost count. Later, I would settle on 12. 12 times my own child struck me in the face. But in that moment, what I'd actually lost track of was who I was. The woman I'd been before those blows was gone. What remained was someone colder, clearer, more determined. Derek stepped back, breathing heavily. He looked at his hands like he was surprised to find them attached to his arms. For just a second, I saw something flicker across his face, something that might have been regret or shame. But then Brianna spoke again, and whatever that flicker was, it died. "Feel better, baby?" she asked, still smiling. She had it coming, always playing the victim, always guilt-tripping you about your dad. Derek nodded, wiping his hands on his pants like he'd touched something dirty. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, I do feel better." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes was worse than the physical pain. I saw indifference. I saw a stranger. "Clean this up," he said, gesturing to the table, where our Thanksgiving dinner sat, getting cold. "And fix that damn faucet yourself if it bothers you so much. I've got work tomorrow." They left. Just like that. Derek grabbed his coat. Brianna grabbed her purse, and they walked out the front door like nothing had happened. I heard the BMW start up, heard them drive away into the rainy Seattle night. I stood in the middle of my dining room for a long time, not moving. My face throbbed. I could feel my cheeks swelling, could taste blood in my mouth, but the physical pain was nothing compared to what I felt inside. It wasn't grief, exactly. It wasn't even anger. It was clarity, cold, sharp, undeniable clarity. I walked upstairs to my bedroom, moving slowly because my head was spinning. In the bathroom, I looked at myself in the mirror. My face was red and puffy, already starting to bruise. Handprints were visible on both cheeks. I looked like someone I'd see on the news, someone I'd feel sorry for. I looked like a victim, but I wasn't going to be a victim. Not anymore. I went to my closet and pulled down the box from the top shelf. It was an old shoebox, dusty and worn, filled with important documents I'd been storing since Tom died. Birth certificates, marriage license, Tom's death certificate, and at the very bottom the papers that Derek thought gave him ownership of this house. I spread them out on my bed and read through them carefully. There was the preliminary deed transfer that I'd signed 4 years ago, when Derek had convinced me it was the smart thing to do. For tax purposes, Mom. For estate planning. It'll make everything easier when you're gone. But beneath that document was something Derek didn't know about. The final filing that was supposed to be submitted to King County, the one that would actually transfer ownership. I'd never sent it in after Tom died. After I'd had time to think without my son constantly pressuring me, I decided to wait, just to be safe, just in case. That decision had saved me. According to the county records, this house was still in my name. Margaret Eileen Thompson. Not Derek. Not jointly. Just me. I sat on my bed holding those papers, and for the first time all evening, I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was something colder than that. Something that came from a place I didn't know I had inside me. Derek thought he owned this house. Brianna thought they were safe here, that they could treat me however they wanted, because I had nowhere else to go. They thought I was trapped. They were wrong. I looked at the clock. It was just past 9. Too late to call anyone tonight. But not too late to start planning. I opened my laptop and began researching. Real estate lawyers, quick sale companies, property rights in Washington state. I read until my eyes burned, until the sun started to peek through the rain clouds, until I had a complete picture of exactly what I could do. But what I didn't realize yet was just how fast everything would move once I made that first phone call. The next morning, Derek and Brianna left for work at their usual time, 7:30 sharp. I listened to them moving around downstairs, heard Brianna complaining about something, heard Derek's phone ringing constantly. They didn't come to check on me. They didn't apologize. They didn't even seem to remember what had happened the night before. I waited until I heard the BMW pull out of the driveway. Then I waited another 10 minutes, just to be safe. Then I picked up my phone and dialed a number I'd found at 3 in the morning. Henderson Legal Services, a warm voice answered. How can I help you? My name is Margaret Thompson, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. I need to speak with Robert Henderson about selling my house. It's urgent. There was a pause. Mr. Henderson is semi-retired, ma'am. He only takes special cases now. May I ask what makes your situation urgent? I touched my swollen face gently. I'm a 62-year-old woman who needs to sell her house before her son gets home from work today. Is that special enough? Another pause. Longer this time. Hold, please. 30 seconds later, a man's voice came on the line. Deep, calm, with the kind of authority that comes from 40 years of practice. This is Bob Henderson. Did I hear correctly that you need to sell your house today? Yes, sir. And you're the legal owner? No disputes. I'm the sole legal owner. I have the deed and all documentation. Where are you located? Seattle. Wallingford neighborhood. I heard him exhale. Mrs. Thompson, I'm going to be honest with you. What you're asking isn't impossible, but it's highly unusual. Before we proceed, I need to know why you're in such a hurry. Is someone in danger? I closed my eyes. I was in danger last night. I won't be again. The line went quiet for a moment. When Bob spoke again, his voice was softer. I understand. Can you be at my office in 1 hour? Bring every document related to the house. And Mrs. Thompson? If you have visible injuries, we may need to involve law enforcement. No police, I said quickly. I just want out. Clean and legal, but fast. All right, he said. 1 hour. I'll clear my schedule. Bob Henderson's office was in downtown Seattle, in one of those old buildings that had survived the city's tech boom without surrendering to glass and steel. I took an Uber. My first time using the app that Derek had always insisted was too complicated for me to learn. It wasn't. Nothing about my life had actually been too complicated. I'd just been told it was for so long that I'd started to believe it. Bob met me in the lobby himself. He was tall and lean, probably close to 70, with silver hair and kind eyes that took in my bruised face without comment. We rode the elevator in silence, and I was grateful for that. I wasn't ready to explain yet. His office was exactly what I'd expected. Dark wood, leather chairs, walls covered with law degrees and certificates. He gestured to a seat across from his desk and poured me a glass of water without asking if I wanted it. I realized my hands were shaking. "Show me what you have," he said simply. I laid out all the papers. Bob read through everything with the careful attention of someone who'd built a career on missing nothing. He made notes, cross-referenced documents, pulled up something on his computer. I sat and waited, watching the Seattle rain streak down the windows behind him. Finally, he looked up. "The house is yours, Mrs. Thompson. Completely and legally yours." Whatever preliminary documents were signed, the actual transfer never took place. "As far as the county is concerned, you're the sole owner." I let out a breath. I didn't know I'd been holding. "So I can sell it?" "You can sell it today if we find the right buyer." He leaned back in his chair. "Now, I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. The person who thinks they own this house, the one you're trying to get away from, are they likely to become violent when they find out?" I thought about Derek's cold eyes, about Brianna's laughter. "I don't know," I said truthfully. 2 days ago, I would have said no. "Now I can't be sure of anything." Bob nodded. "Then we're going to do this carefully. I have a colleague who works with quick sale situations. He has a list of buyers who can close fast, people who want houses in good Seattle neighborhoods and can pay cash. The catch is, you won't get full market value. You'll probably take a 20 to 30% hit on the price." "I don't care about the money," I said. "I care about being free." Something shifted in Bob's expression, a mixture of sadness and respect. "All right then, let's make you free." He picked up his phone and made a call. I sat there listening to him explain my situation in careful professional terms that somehow made it sound less devastating than it felt. "Wallingford neighborhood, well-maintained craftsman, sole owner wants immediate sale, cash offers only, willing to negotiate on price." When he hung up, he looked at me seriously. "I have 3 potential buyers who might be interested. One is a young couple who've been outbid on every house they've offered on for the past 6 months. They're pre-approved for cash purchase through an inheritance. If the house is what they're looking for, they could close today." Today, I felt dizzy. Washington State allows same-day closings if all parties agree and all documentation is in order. Your documentation is perfect. If they want it, and if you're absolutely certain this is what you need to do, we can have this done by 5 o'clock. I looked at my hands. They were my mother's hands now, lined and spotted with age. Tom used to hold these hands. Derek learned to walk while holding these hands. These hands had cooked thousands of meals, wiped away tears, signed report cards, packed lunches, tied shoelaces. These hands could also sign a deed of sale. "Let's do it," I said. The couple's names were Michael and Sarah Chen. They arrived at Bob's office within an hour, young and nervous and hopeful in that way that people are when they're trying to buy their first real home. Sarah was pregnant, maybe 5 months along, and she kept one hand resting protectively on her belly, while Michael asked questions. Bob had arranged for us to meet at a neutral location, rather than at the house itself, which I was grateful for. The Chens sat across from me in the conference room, and I could see them trying not to stare at my bruised face. "Mrs. Thompson," Michael said carefully, "Mr. Henderson explained that you're looking for a very quick sale. We're definitely interested, but we'd need to see the house first. Is that possible?" I'd been dreading this question. Derek and Brianna wouldn't be home until 6 at the earliest. But taking strangers through the house felt dangerous somehow, like I was violating sacred ground even though that ground had stopped being sacred the moment Derek raised his hand to me. "We can go now," I said. "But we need to be done by 3:30. The house looked different in the gray afternoon light. Smaller, somehow, less significant. We'd lived here for 32 years, Tom and I. We'd painted every wall, replaced every fixture, planted every flower in the front garden. Derek had learned to ride his bike on this sidewalk. We'd carved a growth chart into the doorframe of the kitchen, marking Derek's height every birthday from age 5 to 18. All of that history. And yet, walking through it with the Chens, all I could see was the dining room where my son had struck me. All I could smell was Brianna's expensive perfume that always gave me a headache. All I could hear was her laughter. Sarah and Michael walked through respectfully, whispering to each other in the way that couples do when they're making big decisions. I could see Sarah falling in love with the house, the way she ran her hand along the built-in bookshelves in the living room, the way she smiled when she saw the window seat in the bedroom that looked out over the garden. "This is perfect," she whispered to Michael. "It's exactly what we've been looking for." They made an offer on the spot. It was lower than what the house was worth, significantly lower, but it was cash, and it was immediate. Bob had prepared me for this. "Fair market value for a quick escape," he'd said. "That's the trade-off." I accepted without negotiating. Back at Bob's office, the paperwork moved faster than I thought possible. Bob had called in a notary, had contacted an escrow company that specialized in rapid closings, had coordinated with the county recorder's office. There were forms to sign, initials to add, declarations to make. The Chens sat patiently through all of it, their hands clasped together, occasionally glancing at each other with barely contained excitement. At 4:15 the wire transfer cleared. At 4:30 the new deed was filed with King County. At 4:45, Bob handed me a cashier's check for the balance after his fees and closing costs. Just like that, the house was gone. My house, Tom's house. The place where I'd lived my entire adult life. Gone. "Mrs. Thompson," Bob said quietly, "there's one more thing we need to handle. The physical property. Your belongings, your personal items, and the locks." I hadn't thought about the locks. Of course Derek and Brianna still had keys. My things were still in the house. My clothes and photographs, and the jewelry box that had belonged to Tom's mother. The reality of what I'd just done was starting to sink in. "I can help with that," a new voice said from the doorway. We all turned to see a woman in her 60s, dressed in casual clothes, with warm eyes and a practical air about her. "I'm Linda Peterson. Bob called me about an hour ago." Bob stood up. "Linda is a friend of mine. She runs a women's support network here in Seattle. She's helped with situations like yours before." Linda came into the room and sat down next to me, not too close, respecting my space, but offering her presence. "Maggie, is it all right if I call you Maggie? Bob told me you need to get your things out of the house quickly and safely. I have a truck and 3 strong volunteers who can be there in 30 minutes. We can pack up your essential belongings and be gone before anyone gets home." I felt tears prick my eyes for the first time since Derek had hit me. Not tears of sadness or pain, but tears of gratitude. These strangers were helping me escape. "Yes," I managed to say. "Yes, please." Linda pulled out her phone and made calls with the same efficiency Bob had shown earlier. Within minutes, she had a plan. "The Chins can't take possession until tomorrow morning per the agreement, which gives us tonight to clear your things. The locksmith will come at 6 to change all the locks. That gives us about an hour and a half." It was a military operation. Linda's volunteers, 2 women and 1 man, all around my age, descended on the house with boxes and bags and a gentle efficiency that made me want to cry. They packed while I directed, taking my clothes, my books, Tom's photos, the jewelry box, my mother's quilts. They left Derek's things untouched, left Brianna's expensive decorations and designer furniture, took only what was mine. At 5:45, we loaded the last box into Linda's truck. The locksmith was already at the door, beginning his work. I stood on the sidewalk and looked at the house one final time. The rain had started again, that eternal Seattle drizzle, and the house looked gray and sad in the fading light. "Where will you go?" Linda asked gently. I hadn't thought that far ahead. I'd been so focused on getting out that I hadn't considered where I'd go after. "I don't know," I admitted. "I have a spare room," Linda said. "In my house, in Portland. It's yours for as long as you need it. No strings, no timeline. Just a safe place to figure out what comes next." I looked at this stranger who was offering me sanctuary, and I felt something crack open inside my chest. "Why are you helping me?" Linda smiled, but it was sad around the edges. "Because 20 years ago, someone helped me get out of a situation not so different from yours. And because no woman should have to face this alone." At 6:15, Derek's BMW turned onto the street. I watched from Linda's truck, parked half a block away. As he pulled into the driveway, Brianna was with him. I could see her blonde hair through the windshield. They sat in the car for a moment, probably finishing whatever conversation they'd been having, probably planning their evening that didn't include apologizing to me. Derek got out first. He walked up to the front door, pulled out his key, and tried to put it in the lock. It didn't fit. I watched him try again, saw the confusion cross his face. He jiggled the key, tried the knob, stepped back, and looked at the house, like it might explain what was happening. Brianna got out of the car now, her heels clicking on the wet pavement. "What's wrong?" I couldn't hear her from where we sat, but I could read her lips, see her impatient gesture. Derek tried the back door. Same result. He pulled out his phone, probably trying to call me. I'd turned off my phone an hour ago. He tried the side gate, but the locksmith had changed that too. That's when Michael and Sarah Chen pulled up with their car full of moving boxes. They'd agreed to wait until 6:30 to take possession, but they were early, eager to start moving into their new home. I watched Derek approach them, saw the aggressive stance of his body, the way he pointed at the house like he owned it. Michael pulled out papers, probably the deed, showing Derek that no, actually, they owned it now. I saw Derek's face change, saw the moment he realized what had happened. He pulled out his phone again, and this time I knew he was trying to call me. When I didn't answer, he started typing furiously, probably text messages that I wouldn't read. Brianna was yelling now. I could hear her voice carrying down the street, shrill and angry. "We should go," Linda said quietly. She started the truck, and we pulled away from the curb. In the side mirror, I watched Derek standing in the driveway of what used to be my house, his phone pressed to his ear, his face red with rage. Brianna was still yelling at the Chens, who had very wisely gotten back into their car. "Do you think he'll try to find you?" Linda asked as we merged onto I-5 South, heading toward Portland. "Probably," I said, "but I don't think he'll try very hard. Derek isn't persistent. He's used to things being easy." The drive to Portland took 3 hours through rain and early evening traffic. Linda played soft music and didn't push me to talk, which I was grateful for. I watched Washington State slip away behind us, watched us cross into Oregon, watched the landscape change from urban sprawl to stretches of dark forest. My phone was still off, sitting in my purse like a bomb I wasn't ready to defuse. I knew there would be messages from Derek, probably dozens of them, angry messages at first, then confused ones, then maybe apologetic ones when he realized what he'd lost. But what Derek had lost wasn't the house. Houses could be replaced. What he'd lost was any chance of me ever looking at him with maternal love again. Linda's house in Portland was small and warm, the kind of place that felt immediately safe. She set me up in a guest room with clean sheets and a window that looked out over her garden. There were books on the nightstand, and a soft quilt that smelled like lavender. "The bathroom is across the hall," she said. "There's food in the kitchen, help yourself to anything. I'm a light sleeper, so if you need anything during the night, don't hesitate to knock." After she left, I sat on the bed, and finally allowed myself to feel everything I'd been holding back. The fear, the betrayal, the grief for the son I'd lost, and the life I'd left behind. I cried quietly into my hands, my bruised face aching with every sob. But underneath the grief was something else. Something harder and clearer and more solid than I'd felt in years. It was resolve. It was freedom. It was the absolute certainty that I would never again let anyone make me feel small or worthless or trapped. I fell asleep that night in a stranger's guest room, 3 hours from Seattle, with no plan and no clear future. But for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt safe. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains and the smell of coffee drifting up from downstairs. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was, and my heart raced with panic. Then it all came back. Seattle, Derek, the house, freedom. I got up slowly, my body stiff, and my face still tender to the touch. In the bathroom mirror, the bruises had deepened to purple and yellow, impossible to hide. I looked like exactly what I was, a woman who'd been beat. The woman staring back at me was a stranger, but she was also somehow more familiar than the person I'd been pretending to be for the past few years. Downstairs, Linda was making breakfast. She took one look at my face and wordlessly handed me an ice pack, wrapped in a dish towel. "Coffee?" she asked. "Please." We sat at her kitchen table, eating scrambled eggs and toast. And for a while neither of us spoke. It was a comfortable silence, the kind that comes from understanding that sometimes words aren't necessary. Finally, Linda said, "You're going to need to turn on your phone eventually." I nodded. I knew that, but I wasn't ready yet to face whatever was waiting for me in those messages. "Not today, though," Linda added. "Today, you rest. Tomorrow, we figure out the next steps." I spent that first day in Portland doing nothing. I read books from Linda's shelves. I sat in her garden despite the cold. I took a long bath and let myself just exist without purpose or plan. It was the first time in decades that I had no responsibilities, no one depending on me, nowhere I needed to be. That evening, Linda introduced me to her network. 5 other women, all around my age, who gathered in her living room, with wine and snacks and stories. They were the women who'd helped pack up my belongings. Plus 2 others. Each of them had a story similar to mine. Stories of escape and rebuilding, of finding courage they didn't know they had. "This is Maggie," Linda told them. "She sold her house yesterday in 6 hours and made it out clean." The women nodded with understanding and approval. One of them, a tiny woman named Patricia, with fierce eyes, raised her wine glass. "To Maggie. To getting out." "To getting out," they all echoed, and we drank to that. They told me their stories that night. Patricia had left an abusive marriage at 68, and now ran a successful catering business. Janet had escaped a controlling adult daughter, and was going back to college for a degree in social work. Maria had walked away from a family that had drained her dry financially and emotionally, and she'd moved to Costa Rica for 6 months to figure out who she was without them. These women weren't victims. They were survivors, they were warriors. And sitting among them, I realized that I was one of them now. On the 3rd day, I finally turned on my phone. The messages came flooding in. 53 texts from Derek, 12 voicemails, countless missed calls. I read through them chronologically, watching his emotional journey play out in angry bursts of text. The first messages were furious. "What the hell did you do? Call me now. This is illegal. I'm calling the police. You can't just sell my house." Then came confusion. "Mom, please explain what's happening. Why won't you answer? The people at the house have paperwork saying they own it. How is that possible?" Then, desperation. "Mom, I don't understand. Where are you? Are you okay? Bree left. She took everything. I have nowhere to go. Please call me. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The voicemails were worse. I could hear Derek crying in some of them, his voice breaking as he begged me to call him back. In others he was angry, threatening legal action, saying I'd tricked him. The last one, left at 2 in the morning the previous night, was barely coherent. "Mom, I lost everything. The house, Bree. My job called today and said they're letting me go because someone sent them a video. A video of me, of what I did. I don't know who sent it, but they saw it and they fired me. I have nothing left. Please. I'm staying in a motel in Redmond, and I can barely afford it. Please just talk to me. I listened to that message twice, waiting to feel something. Sympathy, guilt, maternal instinct. But all I felt was a hollow kind of satisfaction. Derek had built his life on cruelty and entitlement. And now that foundation had crumbled. Brianna had probably sent the video herself, one final act of destruction before abandoning the sinking ship. I didn't call him back. Instead, I sent a single text message. Derek, what you did was unforgivable. I hope you use this time to get help. Don't contact me again. Then I blocked his number. Linda found me, sitting in the garden afterward, staring at nothing. She sat down next to me without speaking, just being present. I blocked him, I said. Good. He lost his job. His wife left him. He's living in a motel. Also good. I turned to look at her. Shouldn't I feel guilty? Linda's expression was firm but kind. Maggie, you didn't cause any of this. Derek's actions have consequences. That's not your fault, and it's not your responsibility to fix. You spent decades taking care of him. Now it's time to take care of yourself. She was right. I knew she was right. But decades of being a mother don't disappear overnight. Some part of me still wanted to reach out, to help, to fix things. But that part was smaller now, overshadowed by the part that remembered the feel of his hand across my face. The next few weeks settled into a routine. I stayed with Linda, contributing to groceries and helping around the house. I started sleeping better, my nightmares fading. The bruises on my face healed, leaving no physical evidence of what had happened, though the emotional scars were deeper and slower to fade. Linda suggested I see a therapist, and I agreed. Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation to the couple who bought my house, specialized in family trauma and late-life transitions. She was patient and insightful, helping me unpack not just what Derek had done, but the years of small erosions that had led up to it. Abuse doesn't start with a punch, Dr. Chen told me, in one session. It starts with little disrespects, small cruelties, gradual isolation. By the time physical violence occurs, the victim has often already been conditioned to accept mistreatment. She was right. Looking back, I could see the pattern. Derek's dismissive comments about my age, his impatience with my questions, his increasing tendency to make decisions for me, without consulting me. Brianna's barely concealed contempt, the way they'd slowly stopped inviting me to family events, the way they'd treated my presence in their house like an inconvenience rather than recognizing it was my home. You didn't fail as a mother, Dr. Chen said during another session. Derek made his own choices. Your only responsibility now is to yourself. That concept was foreign to me. For 62 years I'd defined myself through other people. Tom's wife, Derek's mother, someone's daughter, someone's friend, someone's employee. The idea of being just Maggie, just myself, was both terrifying and exhilarating. 1 month after leaving Seattle, I made a decision. I was sitting in Linda's garden, watching the early spring flowers push through the wet Oregon soil. When it hit me, I didn't want to go back to Washington. I didn't want to rebuild in a place filled with ghosts and memories. I wanted something completely new. I want land, I told Linda that evening over dinner. Somewhere quiet, somewhere I can grow things, somewhere that's just mine. Linda smiled like she'd been waiting for me to say this. I know a real estate agent in Eugene. She specializes in small properties, farms, homesteads. Want me to call her? Within a week, I was looking at properties. The money from selling the Seattle house, even at the reduced price, was substantial. Tom and I had owned that house outright, and Seattle real estate had appreciated significantly over the decades. After Bob's fees and the closing costs, I had enough to buy something modest with cash, and still have a comfortable cushion for living expenses. The agent, a woman named Carol with sensible shoes and a no-nonsense attitude, showed me 5 properties over 2 days. They ranged from cute to impossible, from overpriced to falling apart. None of them felt right. Then she took me to a small farm property about 40 minutes outside Eugene near the town of Cottage Grove. It was 10 acres of mixed woodland and meadow, with a modest 2-bedroom farmhouse that needed some work, but had good bones. There was a barn that was half collapsed, a chicken coop that was still structurally sound, and a view of the mountains that took my breath away. The previous owner was a man in his 80s, Carol explained, as we walked the property. He moved to a retirement community in Florida to be near his daughter. He kept the place up pretty well until about 5 years ago. So you'll need to do some repairs, but nothing catastrophic. I walked through the meadow feeling the wet grass soak through my shoes. There was a small creek running along the eastern edge of the property, and I could hear it babbling even from a distance. The air smelled like pine and earth and possibility. "I'll take it," I said. Carol laughed. "Don't you want to see inside the house first?" "I'll take it," I repeated. The house was exactly what I needed. Nothing fancy, nothing pretentious, just clean lines and honest construction, and rooms filled with light. The kitchen had old appliances that still worked. The bathroom needed updating but was functional. The bedrooms were small but adequate. There was a wood stove in the living room, and a covered porch that wrapped around 2 sides of the house. I made an offer that afternoon, cash. Closing in 2 weeks. The seller accepted immediately, probably relieved to have found a buyer who didn't care about the barn or the overgrown gardens, or the fact that the nearest grocery store was 20 minutes away. "What will you do out here?" Linda asked when I told her about the property. "It's pretty isolated." "That's the point," I said. "I'm going to learn to be alone without being lonely. I'm going to grow vegetables. And maybe get some chickens. I'm going to read all the books I never had time for. I'm going to figure out who Maggie Thompson is, when she's not defined by anyone else." Linda hugged me tight. "You're going to be wonderful." The closing was smooth and uneventful. Carol handed me the keys on a bright March morning, and I drove out to the property alone, wanting this first moment to be just mine. I parked in the gravel driveway, walked up to the front door, and let myself into my house. My house, not Derek's, not Tom's memory, not anyone's but mine. I walked through the empty rooms, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. Sunlight streamed through windows that needed cleaning. Dust motes danced in the air. Everything was silent, except for birdsong outside, and the distant sound of the creek. In the master bedroom, I stood at the window looking out over my land, my meadow, my trees, my mountains, and I started to cry. Not sad tears, but tears of relief, and release, and something that felt almost like joy. I'd spent my whole life taking care of other people. Now finally, I was going to take care of myself. The first few weeks in the new house were a blur of cleaning, organizing, and basic repairs. Linda came to visit and helped me paint the kitchen a cheerful yellow. Patricia brought her son to fix the sagging porch railing. Janet contributed a truckload of furniture from an estate sale she'd heard about, good solid pieces that fit the farmhouse aesthetic perfectly. I bought chickens, 6 young hens from a local farmer who threw in a rooster for free. "Name's Henry," the farmer said. "He's a good boy, keeps the girls in line." I built them a proper run extending from the old chicken coop which I'd cleaned and repaired with the help of a handyman from town. Every morning I woke to Henry's crowing and went out in my boots and an old jacket to collect eggs. Every evening I sat on my porch with tea and watched the sun set over the mountains. It was simple. It was quiet. It was exactly what I needed. But something was still missing. A purpose beyond just existing. The answer came from an unexpected place. I'd been going to a weekly farmer's market in Cottage Grove, selling my excess eggs and getting to know the other vendors. One of them, a woman named Ruth, who sold baked goods, mentioned that she volunteered at a women's shelter in Eugene. They're always looking for people, she said, bagging up a loaf of sourdough for me. Especially older women. The young ones who come in. They need to see that it's possible to start over at any age. That night, I called the shelter. The director, a weary-sounding woman named Monica, perked up when I explained my background. You left an abusive situation at 62? She asked. Yes. And you rebuilt completely? New house, new life, everything. Yes. Can you come in tomorrow? The shelter was in a nondescript building in a quiet Eugene neighborhood, deliberately unmarked for safety reasons. Monica met me at the door, a black woman in her 50s with kind eyes and an air of competence that reminded me of Linda. We have 30 beds, she explained as she gave me a tour. We're always full. Women fleeing domestic violence, women escaping homelessness, women getting out of situations that would break your heart. Ages range from 18 to 73. Our oldest resident right now is a grandmother who finally left her abusive son. Something in my chest tightened. Her son? Yes, he'd been financially abusing her for years, taking her social security, controlling her medication. She finally got out when a neighbor helped her contact us. Monica showed me the common areas. The small private rooms, the children's play area where I could hear kids laughing. What we need, she said, is someone to run a weekly support group. Nothing formal, nothing clinical, just a safe space for women to talk about starting over. Especially older women who think it's too late for them. I'm not a therapist, I said. We have therapists. What we need is someone who's been through it and come out the other side. Someone who can sit with them and say, I understand, and mean it. I started the following week. 8 women showed up to that first meeting, ranging in age from 47 to 70. We sat in a circle in the shelter's community room, and I told them my story. Not the sanitized version, but the real one. The slaps, the laughter, the fear, the escape, the house sale that happened in 6 hours, the blocked phone number, the farm I'd bought with my freedom money. They listened with the kind of attention that comes from recognition. When I finished, a woman named Donna, 52 years old with a black eye that was still fresh, said, You really did it. You really got out. You really did it too, I told her. You're here. That's the hardest part. We talked for 2 hours that first night, and when it was over, several of the women hugged me. One of them, the 73-year-old grandmother, held my hand and whispered, Thank you for showing me it's not too late. That group became my purpose. Every Wednesday evening, I drove into Eugene and sat with women who were rebuilding their lives. Some weeks we had 3 women. Some weeks we had 15. We talked about practical things, like how to open a bank account when you've never had one in your name, how to find affordable housing, how to deal with the guilt of leaving family behind. But mostly we talked about hope. 3 months after I'd moved to the farm, on a warm June evening, I was in my garden picking tomatoes, when I heard a car coming up my long driveway. I straightened, wiping dirt from my hands, my body tensing automatically. Very few people knew where I lived. Linda, Carol the real estate agent, Monica from the shelter. I'd been careful about keeping my location private. The car that emerged from the tree line was a beat-up Honda Civic, not Derek's BMW. It pulled up near my house and sat idling for a moment before the engine cut off. The door opened, and Derek got out. He looked terrible. He'd lost weight, his clothes hung loose on his frame, and his face had a gray quality that spoke of too little sleep and too much stress. He didn't approach immediately, just stood by his car, his hands in his pockets, looking at me across the garden. Mom, he called out, and his voice cracked on the word. My heart was pounding, but I kept my voice steady. How did you find me? I hired an investigator. Cost most of what I had left, but I needed to find you. I needed to. He trailed off, looking lost. I set down my basket of tomatoes and walked closer, but I kept a good 20 feet between us. You need to leave, Derek. Please, just let me talk. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. Against my better judgment, against everything Dr. Chen had taught me about boundaries. I nodded. 5 minutes. You can talk from right there. Don't come any closer. Derek nodded, accepting the terms. He looked at the ground, gathering his thoughts, and when he looked up again, his eyes were wet. I've been going to therapy, he said. 3 times a week. Anger management, family therapy, individual counseling. I've been going to meetings too, for people who've committed domestic violence. I'm working on myself, Mom. I'm trying to understand why I did what I did. And why did you do it? I asked. He was quiet for a long moment. Because I thought I could. Because Bree made it seem like you were the problem, like everything wrong in our life was your fault. Because I was stressed about money and work, and I needed someone to blame. Because, he swallowed hard, because I'm my father's son, and Dad used to hit you too, didn't he? The question hit me like a physical blow. I hadn't expected him to bring up Tom, hadn't expected him to see that pattern. Your father had his demons, I said carefully. But he got help. He stopped. The last 15 years of our marriage were good ones. I remember some of it, Derek said. Not much, but enough. The way he'd yell, the way you'd flinch. I blocked most of it out, but it's coming back now, in therapy. And I realized that I learned that behavior from him, that I thought it was normal. It's not normal, Derek, and understanding where it came from doesn't erase what you did. I know. He wiped his eyes roughly. I know that. I'm not asking you to forgive me, Mom. I'm not even asking you to talk to me again after today. I just needed you to know that I see it now. I see what I did. I see what I destroyed. And I'm sorry. I'm so goddamn sorry. We stood in silence, the evening birds singing around us, the creek babbling in the distance. This was the apology I'd thought I wanted, the acknowledgement of harm, the genuine remorse. But hearing it didn't change anything. It didn't undo the violence. It didn't rebuild trust. It was just words. Where are you living now? I asked finally. Tacoma. I found work with a smaller real estate firm. Entry-level stuff. I'm renting a room in someone's house. Bree took everything when she left, cleaned out our bank account. But I'm managing. Barely, but managing. Good. I'm glad you're getting help. I'm glad you're working on yourself. But Derek, that doesn't change what I need to tell you. I took a deep breath. You're not welcome in my life anymore. Not now, maybe not ever. I need you to respect that boundary. His face crumpled. Mom, please. No. My voice was firm. You don't get to mom me anymore. You lost that right when you raised your hand to me. What you need to do now is leave. Go back to Tacoma. Keep going to therapy, work on being a better person. But do it away from me. I've built a life here that doesn't include you, and I need to protect that. Derek stood there for another moment, tears running down his face, and I felt nothing. No sympathy, no maternal instinct to comfort him, no desire to make his pain less. He'd earned this pain. He needed to sit with it. Okay, he said finally, his voice barely audible. Okay, I'll go. He got back in his car and sat there for a moment, and I thought he might try again, might make one more plea. But he didn't. He started the engine, backed up carefully, and drove away down my long driveway. I watched until the dust settled and the sound of his car faded completely. Then I picked up my basket of tomatoes and went back to my garden. There was still work to do before sunset, and I'd learned that the best way to process difficult emotions was to put my hands in the dirt and grow something. That night, I called Dr. Chen and told her about Derek's visit. How do you feel? She asked. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me is glad he's getting help. Part of me doesn't care at all. Is that terrible? It's honest, she said. Maggie, you don't owe Derek your forgiveness, or your presence, or your energy. He's working on himself, which is good, but that's his journey. Your journey is separate now. You get to protect your peace. Protecting my peace became my mantra. I said no to things that didn't serve me. I built friendships with people who respected my boundaries. I learned to garden seriously, expanding from tomatoes to a full vegetable plot. I got 3 goats that I named after Supreme Court justices. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Sonia, and Elena were terrible escape artists, but excellent company. The women's group at the shelter continued to grow. Monica asked me to facilitate a second weekly meeting, and I agreed. Some of the women I'd met in those early sessions started coming back as volunteers once they'd gotten on their feet, paying forward the support they'd received. One of them was Donna, the woman with the black eye from that first meeting. 6 months after leaving her abusive husband, she'd gotten a job as a medical assistant and found her own apartment. She started co-facilitating the group with me, sharing her story of rebuilding. "You saved my life," she told me one evening after a particularly emotional session. "No," I said. "You saved your own life. I just held space for you while you did it." As fall arrived in Oregon, painting the mountains in shades of gold and crimson, I found myself thinking about the past year. 12 months ago, I'd been living in Seattle, walking on eggshells around my own son, accepting cruelty as normal. Now I was living on a farm, facilitating support groups, growing food, raising animals, and building a community of women who understood resilience. I thought about Derek sometimes, wondered if he was still in therapy, if he was making progress. But those thoughts came less frequently and mattered less intensely. He was a chapter I'd closed, not out of hatred, but out of necessity. One October morning, I was feeding the chickens when Linda called. "Maggie, have you been online today?" "No, why?" "There's an article about you. Well, not about you specifically, but about women who rebuild after family abuse. It's on one of those lifestyle websites." They interviewed Monica from the shelter, and she talked about your group. She called it life-changing. I logged onto my laptop, something I did rarely these days, and found the article, "Finding Strength in Silver: How Older Women Are Redefining Fresh Starts." It featured several women, including a brief mention of the support group at Eugene's women's shelter, led by a 62-year-old woman who escaped an abusive situation and now helps others do the same. The article didn't name me, respecting my privacy, but it quoted Monica extensively. "These women need to see that age isn't a barrier to starting over. Our volunteer facilitator is living proof that you can rebuild at any stage of life." She sold her house in 6 hours, moved to a new state, bought a farm, and created a whole new existence. She's inspirational. I read the article twice, surprised by how strange it felt to see my story reduced to a few paragraphs. The reality had been so much messier, so much more painful and complicated. But if those paragraphs helped even one woman believe she could leave, then maybe the oversimplification was worth it. The article brought unexpected attention. Monica called a few days later to say that donations to the shelter had increased significantly. Women were calling from all over Oregon, asking about the support group. One woman drove 3 hours from Bend just to attend a single session. "I think you should write a book," Linda said, when she visited that weekend to help me winterize the chicken coop. "A book? About what?" "About this. About leaving Derek. About rebuilding. About being 62 and starting from scratch. Maggie, there are millions of women out there who think it's too late for them. You could show them it's not." The idea was terrifying and intriguing in equal measure. I wasn't a writer. I'd been a dental hygienist for 30 years before I retired, not an author. But late at night, when the farm was quiet and the stars were bright over the mountains, I found myself writing. It started as journal entries processing my own experiences. But gradually, it evolved into something more structured. I wrote about the warning signs I'd missed, about the gradual erosion of self-worth, about the moment I'd found those deed papers and realized I had power I didn't know I possessed. I wrote about Bob Henderson and Linda and the women at the shelter. I wrote about chickens and gardens and learning to be alone. I wrote for 6 months, getting up before dawn to write while drinking coffee on my porch, the words flowing easier than I'd expected. When I finally had a complete manuscript, I sent it to Linda, who sent it to her friend who worked in publishing. 2 weeks later, I had an offer from a small press that specialized in memoirs. They wanted to publish my story under the title Starting Over at 62, A Grandmother's Guide to Finding Freedom. It's not going to be a bestseller, the editor told me honestly during our phone call. But it's going to matter to the women who need it. And sometimes that's more important. The book came out the following spring, released quietly, without fanfare. I did a few local readings, including one at the shelter that packed the room. Women bought copies and asked me to sign them, and I wrote the same message in each one. It's never too late to choose yourself. What I didn't expect was Derek. The book had been out for about a month when a package arrived at my farm. Inside was a copy of my own book, well-worn and full of post-it notes marking pages. With it was a letter in Derek's handwriting. "Mom," it began, and I almost stopped reading right there. But something made me continue. "I bought your book the day it came out. I've read it 6 times now. Every time I read it, I see more clearly what I did to you, what I took from you, the violence I inflicted. I see myself in these pages, and I'm ashamed. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I understand now that I may never have that, and I've learned in therapy that I need to accept that consequence. I'm writing because I want you to know that your book changed my life." After I read it the first time, I started volunteering at a men's group for domestic violence offenders. I share my story there. I tell them about hitting my mother 12 times while my wife laughed and filmed it. I tell them about losing everything, and I tell them that our victims don't owe us anything, not forgiveness, not second chances, nothing. Some of them get angry at me for saying that. They want to believe that if they just say sorry enough, everything will go back to normal. But I use your book to show them that normal was the problem, that our victims deserve to build new lives without us in them. I'm not asking to see you. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that even though I can't fix what I broke, I'm trying to make sure other men don't break what they have. Thank you for writing this book. Thank you for being brave enough to tell the truth. Derek. I read the letter 3 times, sitting at my kitchen table with my now cold coffee. This was different from his tearful apology at my farm. This wasn't about him seeking absolution. This was about him doing the work without expecting reward. I didn't respond to the letter. I didn't need to. Derek was on his own journey now. And whether he continued to grow or backslid wasn't my responsibility. But I kept the letter, filed away in a drawer, as evidence that sometimes people can change, not for the person they harmed, but for themselves and for the people they might harm in the future. That summer, 18 months after I'd left Seattle, the farm came fully into its own. The vegetable garden exploded with produce, more than I could possibly eat. I started bringing boxes of vegetables to the farmer's market, donating the proceeds to the shelter. The chickens were thriving. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the goat, had a baby I named Merrick, and my little farmhouse had become exactly what I'd wanted it to be, a sanctuary. The support groups continued, now expanded to 3 times a week, due to demand. I trained 2 other women to facilitate, sharing the load. We started a small lending library at the shelter, filled with books about resilience and starting over, including several copies of my book. One evening, after a particularly powerful group session where a woman in her 70s had shared her story of leaving an abusive situation after 50 years of marriage, Monica pulled me aside. "Maggie, I want to talk to you about something. The shelter is starting a new program, funded by a grant we just received. We want to create transitional housing for older women, women over 55, who are leaving abusive situations, but don't have the family support or retirement income to make it on their own." "That's wonderful," I said. "We want you to be the program director." I stared at her. "Monica, I'm not qualified for that. I don't have a background in social work or—" "You have something better. You have lived experience, and you have the trust of these women. The position comes with a salary, not huge, but enough. You'd coordinate housing, connect women with resources, run support groups, hire and train other facilitators. You'd be building something that will help hundreds of women." I thought about my farm, my quiet life, my carefully constructed peace. Taking this job would mean more time in Eugene, more emotional labor, more responsibility. But I also thought about the 73-year-old grandmother I'd met on my first day at the shelter. The one who'd held my hand and thanked me for showing her it wasn't too late. "Can I think about it?" I asked. "Take a week," Monica said. I spent that week weighing my options. I talked to Linda, to Dr. Chen, to Ruth at the farmer's market. I sat on my porch and watched the sunset. I fed my chickens and weeded my garden and thought about purpose. In the end, the decision was easy. I called Monica and accepted the position. Over the next year, I helped launch New Horizons, a program providing temporary housing and support services for older women leaving abuse. We converted an old apartment building into 6 small units, each with a kitchen and bathroom, allowing women to maintain their independence while having community support. The program filled immediately. Our first residents were women ranging in age from 57 to 81, each with her own story of escape and survival. I met with them weekly, helped them navigate Social Security and Medicare, connected them with job training programs, and most importantly, created a community where they didn't have to face rebuilding alone. One of those women was named Betty, 76 years old, who'd left her adult son after he'd been financially abusing her for a decade. She reminded me of myself in so many ways, the quiet strength that gets mistaken for weakness, that ability to endure that shouldn't have been necessary. "I thought I'd die in that house," Betty told me during one of our sessions. "I thought I'd just keep taking it until my heart gave out. Then, I read your book, and I realized I had options." "You always had options," I told her. "You just needed someone to show you they were real." Betty thrived in the program. Within 6 months, she'd gotten a part-time job at a local bookstore, saved enough for her own apartment, and started volunteering at the shelter. She and I became friends, often sitting together at the farmer's market on Saturday mornings, her selling her knitted goods, me selling my vegetables. 2 years after leaving Seattle, I stood in my garden on a perfect September morning, harvesting tomatoes and thinking about how strange life was. I'd spent 6 decades being wife, mother, caregiver, always defined by my relationship to other people. Then I'd spent 12 months being alone, learning who I was, without those labels. Now I was something else entirely. I was still Maggie, still living alone on my farm, still treasuring my solitude, but I was also program director, facilitator, mentor, author. I was part of a community of women who'd all survived their own versions of my story. My phone buzzed with a text from Linda. "Ruth made extra bread, coming by at noon with lunch." "Don't argue." I smiled and texted back in acceptance. This was my life now. Good friends who showed up without asking. Work that mattered. Land that fed me. Animals that made me laugh. Quiet mornings and busy afternoons, and evenings spent in community with women who understood. I thought about Derek occasionally, wondered if he was still doing the work, still volunteering with that men's group. But those thoughts came rarely, and without pain. He was living his life somewhere in Washington, and I was living mine in Oregon, and there was a clean boundary between them that I had no desire to cross. That afternoon, Linda arrived with bread and cheese and news. "Patricia is getting married," she announced, "to that handyman who fixed your porch. They're having a small ceremony next month, and she wants you to be there." "Patricia? Really? I didn't even know they were dating." Linda laughed. "They weren't, and then they were. She says she's 69 years old and she's done playing games. When you know, you know." I thought about that concept. When you know, you know. I'd known when it was time to leave Derek. I'd known when I saw the farm that it was meant to be mine. I'd known when Monica offered me the job that I needed to take it. Maybe that's what wisdom was, not having all the answers, but trusting yourself when the answer revealed itself. Patricia's wedding was small and perfect, held in her backyard under a canopy of late summer stars. She wore a simple dress and flowers in her hair, and her handyman, whose name was George, looked at her like she'd hung the moon. They'd both been married before, both lost spouses to death and divorce. Both thought they were done with romance. "Life surprises you," Patricia said in her vows, "when you finally stop trying to control it and just let it unfold." Sitting there among the women who'd become my chosen family, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not happiness exactly, but contentment. Deep, genuine, uncomplicated contentment. The program continued to grow. By the end of my second year as director, we'd helped 43 women transition out of abuse and into independent living. Not all of them succeeded. Some went back to their abusers, some struggled with addiction or mental health issues that required more support than we could provide, but most of them made it, found jobs and apartments, and lives that belonged to them. I wrote a second book, not about my own story this time, but a practical guide for older women leaving abuse. It's Never Too Late. A practical guide to starting over after 50 included resources, step-by-step instructions for documenting abuse, tips for quick house sales, information about elder law, and most importantly stories from the women I'd worked with who'd given permission to share their experiences. That book did better than the first, picked up by a larger publisher, and distributed nationally. I started getting emails from women all over the country, thanking me, asking questions, sharing their own stories. I answered as many as I could, always ending with the same message: you deserve to feel safe. You deserve to be free. It's never too late to choose yourself. On the 3-year anniversary of selling my Seattle house, I threw a party at my farm. Linda helped me set up tables in the meadow, and we invited everyone, the women from the shelter, the farmers market vendors, my neighbors, Monica and the shelter staff, Betty and the other New Horizons residents, Patricia and George, even Carol the real estate agent, who'd found me this perfect piece of land. We ate food everyone had contributed, drank wine and lemonade, played music, and as the sun set over the mountains, I stood and made a toast. 3 years ago, I said, my voice carrying across the meadow, I was a different person. I was smaller, quieter, more afraid. I let other people define me, control me, hurt me. And then one day, I decided I'd had enough. It wasn't a dramatic decision. It was just a quiet realization that I deserved better. I looked around at all these faces, these women and men who'd become my community. I'm not gonna lie and say it was easy. It wasn't. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, days I wasn't sure I'd made the right choice, moments I felt so alone I could barely breathe, but I kept going, and slowly, day by day, I built this life. Not the life I thought I was supposed to have, but the life I actually wanted. I raised my glass. So here's to starting over. Here's to being brave enough to leave what's killing you, even when you're not sure what comes next. Here's to all of us who chose ourselves when everyone else expected us to keep sacrificing. We're not victims, we're survivors, we're warriors, and we're just getting started. To starting over, everyone echoed, and we drank to that. Later, as people were leaving and the stars were coming out, Betty found me cleaning up paper plates. She helped me gather trash in silence for a few minutes before speaking. I need to tell you something, she said. My son contacted me last week. He wants to meet to apologize. My hands stilled. How do you feel about that? I don't know. Part of me wants to hear what he has to say. Part of me wants to tell him to go to hell. Part of me just wants to keep living my life without him in it. All of those feelings are valid, I told her. What did you do? When Derek tried to come back? I thought about that day, about Derek standing in my driveway looking broken. I listened to his apology. I acknowledged that he was working on himself. And then I told him to keep doing that work somewhere else, away from me. I protected my peace. Betty nodded slowly. That's what I need to do. Protect my peace. Only you know what that looks like, I said. But whatever you decide, make sure it's for you, not for him. She hugged me then, tight and grateful. Thank you, Maggie, for everything. After everyone left, I sat on my porch with a final glass of wine. Henry the rooster settled sleepily in the coop, the goats quiet in their barn, the night sounds of Oregon all around me. I thought about the woman I'd been 3 years ago, standing in a Seattle dining room with her face on fire and her heart breaking. I thought about all the versions of myself I'd been over 65 years. The young bride, the new mother, the widow, the victim, the survivor, the rebuilder, the advocate. And I realized that I wasn't done yet. There were more versions of Maggie Thompson still to come, more chapters still to be written. Because that's what I'd learned in these 3 years of starting over. Life doesn't end when you think it does. It just changes shape. The truth about revenge, about justice, about leaving abuse, is that it's not one dramatic moment. It's 1,000 small moments of choosing yourself. It's selling a house in 6 hours, yes. But it's also planting tomatoes knowing you'll be there to harvest them. It's facilitating support groups on Wednesday nights when you could be home watching TV. It's writing books that might help someone you'll never meet. It's setting boundaries with adult children who never learn to respect you. It's adopting chickens and goats and learning their personalities. It's making friends at 62 who accept you exactly as you are. Revenge isn't loud. Real revenge is building a life so full and rich and peaceful that the person who hurt you becomes irrelevant to your happiness. I went inside, brushed my teeth, climbed into my bed in my house on my land that I'd bought with my freedom. Tomorrow I'd wake up early and feed my animals, and maybe write another chapter of the book I'd started about creating community in later life. Tomorrow I'd drive to Eugene for a meeting at the shelter. Tomorrow I'd live another day of this life I'd built from the ashes of the old one. But tonight, I just slept deep and dreamless and safe. Every story carries within it an echo of our shared humanity. If this story has touched your heart, share it with someone special. Leave us a comment about what you felt, and subscribe to join us for more soul-reaching stories. Because every life tells a story that deserves to be heard. See you next time.